The two nuns I spoke to, one of whom says she saw the young woman in the phone box, the other says she saw three men around the phone box.
Was there any blood?
There's blood on a towel, but not a lot of blood, but something clearly was wrong.
Post-war Australia was a very good, because there were cars, you could drive from A to B as fast as you can now,
Yes.
really, and yet no cameras,
No
surveillance, no telephone troubles. You could get away with murder, and many people did. I'm Andrew Rule, this is Life and Crimes. We welcome back today Helen Thomas, who's been here before, because Helen Thomas has written a book and another updated book on the Easey St case. And along the way, she has spent a lot of time researching and writing about and thinking about and now podcasting about the allied and linked case, the disappearance of the Californian girl Julie Garciacelay, about 18 months before the Easey St murders. Easey St, Collingwood, 1977, I think January, was it? And the Julie Garciacelay disappearance was from an apartment in North Melbourne 18 months earlier, I'm going to say the winter of 1975, approximately. If you wanted to know more about this and you haven't caught up with it before, we did an episode a long time ago called The Californian Girl. Helen Thomas, you are probably the expert on this case at this point because you have spent serious time doing proper investigation, finding people. You're a veteran reporter. You've spent decades reporting since we worked together at The Age decades ago, and you've used a lot of that street wisdom and know-how, sort of that blend of pushiness and charm to get through the door and talk to people who actually have never spoken publicly before. And I was absolutely riveted last night when I listened to one of the episodes of your new podcast, Julie's Gone, and I heard you unravelling the simple but devastating story of the Ukrainian nuns who, as young nuns in North Melbourne, saw certain events unfolding on the street. I'm going to take you to that scene. Who were the nuns and what did they see?
Well, Andrew, they were women in their 30s, early 30s at that time, and they were living in a convent, which was a big double-storey, double-fronted terrace in Canning Street, North Melbourne, directly opposite the cathedral, the Ukrainian Catholic Cathedral, which sits at the top of Canning Street there. And two of them saw a young woman being dragged out of the phone box, which was right directly in front of that convent, so sitting on the side of the cathedral. Yeah. This young woman was in the phone box. At one point, three men were standing around her. Yep. They dragged her out of the phone box and threw her into the back seat of a car and sped down Canning Street towards Flemington. So in that episode you listened to, one of the nuns, Sister Zinovia, is still living in North Melbourne at the convent at the cathedral, and she was able to describe in quite compelling detail what she remembers very vividly.
We're going to flash back from that to sketch it in for our listeners. The disappearance of Julie Garciacelay happened, give us a date, do you remember?
1st of July 1975.
Right, and she was living with her sister, her older sister, in this apartment or flat in Canning Street. Yeah. Julie had just arrived not many months before from California, and her older sister, I think, had been here a bit longer. Julie had got a job at the Australian and Truth offices, Southdown Press, I think it was called, and she worked in the library there. She was, it's a clerical job in the library. Yeah,
she was a temp librarian.
Temp librarian. And as such, as a temp librarian, she'd come into sort of daily contact or weekly contact, whatever, with people who worked there, including some of the reporters, including a particular Truth reporter called John Grant. And she got to know him slightly, and she also got to know a couple of guys that John Grant had brought into the building to look through the newspaper records, the library records, the old scrapbooks that we used to keep in those days.
We're not sure exactly how they ended up in the library, but you're right. On the afternoon of the day she disappeared, on July the 1st, three men came to visit her in the library.
In the library?
Yeah, including John Grant, the reporter.
John Grant and two others.
Yeah, two others.
No real doubt that those two others were
John Power.
Joseph Power.
A
notorious criminal then and even more so later.
And Reese Tommy Collins.
Who, not as notorious a criminal, but a professional prize fighter who rubbed shoulders with notorious figures in the underworld. He was, like many prize fighters of that era, he was no shrinking violet, and not lily white either, probably. But a bit of a con man, pretty good-looking bloke, all of those things.
Yeah, and they turned up in the library.
Yeah.
And were talking to Julie about soul food restaurants, because apparently Tommy was interested
in opening one.
And this was heard by some of the other women in the library who were working with Julie, one of whom I spoke to in the podcast. And so they were there for about, 10, 15 minutes. And at the end of that conversation about soul food, they sort of somehow invited themselves round to her apartment later on that night. And after they left, a couple of the girls, her colleagues said, "Oh, do you reckon 3 blokes coming around?" "Oh, no, it'll be fine," said Julie. And one of her...
Californian confidence.
Yeah, or,
whatever,
a naive young 19-year-old, 10 days shy of her 20th birthday. I guess, maybe she thought her sister was going to be home. She didn't seem worried by it. And when they were trying to talk to her about it, one of her colleagues said she just wasn't concerned. So they got back to work, and that night the 3 men turned up at her apartment.
Let's not put too much spin on it, but one was a known criminal and a violent one. One is, as I say, a prize fighter who probably had a bit of criminal history of some sort. And the other one was a dyed-in-the-wool crime writer for Truth magazine, which was a scandal sheet, and its crime reporters were pretty hard cases. And John Grant's not the only one. There was Jack Darmody and others. They were a pretty hard lot. And they ran with crooks. And that's how they got stories. So the other women in the library, their judgment wasn't that far astray, really, to put it mildly.
Julie wasn't concerned.
She wasn't concerned. So the net result is those 3 men end up at her apartment that night. What happened then?
It's hard to know exactly what happened then, but from their accounts, from the 3 accounts that the men gave, initially in 2 of them gave in 1975.
It's alleged this is what happened.
That's right.
Yeah.
They went round pizza and beer, and they sat around talking for however long, an hour or so, an hour and a half. She then decided to make a phone call because apparently her sister had asked her to make a phone call. So she, according to their accounts, left the apartment to make that phone call. And
at a public telephone box.
Well, they assume so, because there was no phone in the house.
No, of course, even though some people had private telephones in that era, many didn't. And if you had a rented flat, you'd go outside the telephone box.
That's right.
Okay.
And so this brings us to where the nuns say they saw, the 2 nuns I spoke to, one of whom says she saw a young woman in the phone box, the other says she saw 3 men around the phone box.
Let's thread that needle. What leads you to the nuns, and what makes us think the nuns can remember over 49 years what night they saw a young woman being pulled from a phone box?
Well, Julie's mother, when I found Julie's mum
in California,
48 years later, she told me many things, but one of the things she mentioned was that the girls had said, her daughters had said, that there was a Russian woman living on the opposite their door. Her apartment was opposite their apartment on the same landing, and she was a really light sleeper. So Ruth Garciacelay, her mum, her question was, why didn't they speak to her, and why didn't she hear anything? Why didn't she see anything? If she's such a light sleeper, what was happening?
Right.
So I thought, Russian. Maybe she has some connection to the Ukrainian cathedral. Who was she really? I have to start somewhere.
So this Ukrainian cathedral is a matter of...
it's 2 minutes away, 1 minute away, walk away.
Yep.
So I contacted the cathedral, and initially they didn't get back to me. Then they did, and I was incredibly lucky, as you can be as a journalist. I started dealing with a woman, an administrator there. She was the executive assistant to the bishop at the time. She initially said to me, look, no, all the priests have died, all the clergy have died, so I can't help you. But it was one of those queries that was so unusual that she kept thinking about it. And I think she was going to the post office 2 days later, and she thought, hang on, the priests have all died, but there are still a couple of the nuns who were there then, still here, still with us.
Yep.
So she asked the nun, Sister Zenobia, and that's where we came to the story. So Sister Zenobia is the one who saw, out of the top.
She was in her 30s then, so she's
90.
She's 90, and another one too.
Another one, the Mother Superior, who's now living in Sydney.
Right.
She didn't see anyone in the phone box. She walked past with another nun. She walked past 3 men standing around the phone box as she was leaving the cathedral because she was doing late work in the cathedral. Across the road.
How are we able to date it? Yes.
Well, the assistant to the bishop got really interested in actually working out who was there at the time and how is it possible that this is the same incident. And she worked out that it could in fact be true because it was the day the bishop at the time left Australia and went on a trip overseas.
Here's a fact that can't be negated. The bishop left on a given day, and on the same day, Julie Garciacelay goes missing that night.
Yep.
And we know that date. The tricky bit here, the triangulation, if you like, is that their memory of the bishop just left, so we can't talk to him. Is that the?
That's right.
That's the missing
because
fact.
When the next after
that's
this
the
happened,
extra fact.
That's right. So when they saw this happening, the 2 nuns upstairs saw it happening. The 2 nuns downstairs heard this young girl calling for help, and a bit of a commotion on the street.
And the others saw 3 men standing around a phone.
That's right. 2 nuns walking across the road saw the 3 men. So you got 2 different perspectives.
Yeah.
But all of them heard screaming.
Yes.
And 2 of them upstairs had a very good view onto the street of this young girl being dragged.
And read the date.
Yeah.
There's no doubt that happened. Happened, but read the date. Subsequently, they recall clearly that they would like to have talked to the bishop about it because he's just got on an Alitalia flight to Europe.
That's right.
And so they can't talk to him.
And this is really important.
And this is a bit that dates it.
That's right. And this is really crucial because without the bishop there, I mean, not surprisingly, they didn't want to go out into the street that night to go across to the cathedral to raise the alarm with the priests because they both say, the 2 nuns that I speak to, Sister Zenobia and Sister Anicia, who was the Mother Superior, both of them say they were scared. So they just battened down the hatches in a sense. The next morning they went across the road, talked to the priests, 1 or 2 of whom, from what I understand, also heard something. Not sure that they saw anything, but they certainly heard some sort of commotion. What they say is be very careful from now on.
The priests just said, they didn't say, let's ring the police.
No.
And of course, these are Ukrainian migrants, aren't they?
Yep.
Their command of English is poor.
Argentinian.
Yep. Argentinian.
Yeah.
All of them?
Oh, well, the nuns were from Argentina.
So they're speaking what?
They're speaking Ukrainian.
Ukrainian.
Yep.
Okay.
And Argentinian, I guess, but Ukrainian.
So
English is their second or third language.
Yeah.
And, and politically, let's remember what's happening at the time in the 70s in Argentina.
Yes.
It's a tumultuous political scenario.
They've come from a scary place where the people who pull you out of phone boxes may well be the police.
That's right. And so their first instance is to talk to the priests.
Yeah.
The priests say, be careful, but the priests don't say, let's go to the police.
No.
And then you factor in the fact that...
No phones.
No phones.
No television. So they're not seeing the news.
No, not that there was much news.
They're not aware of Julie Garciacelay. They're not reading English language newspapers. So they don't really know anything about Julie Garciacelay, their own neighbour, basically, disappearing.
And they didn't recognise her as their own neighbour.
No.
And so that series of facts that we know to be true, what we also know is that when Julie does go missing and her sister, who had been staying away that night, she'd gone to visit friends and had stayed over, I think, in Kensington, comes back early in the afternoon, realises that there's a bit of disarray, shall we say, in the apartment.
Well, describe it. What do you believe was there?
There's some empty beer bottles, some clothing that had been cut up.
Cut up? Why cut up?
A nightie had been sort of slit at the top. There were other clothes that were folded.
Was there any blood?
There's blood on a towel, but not a lot of blood. But something clearly was wrong.
Cut up clothing, that's strange, isn't it?
Yeah. So Gail, her sister, Gail Garciacelay, starts ringing people who might know and rings the office at Truth and speaks to Jules Thatcher, who is the colleague that we were mentioning before, and says, is Julie at work? And she says no. And
colleague in the library.
In the library, sorry. Yep, at Southdown Press.
And you've found her?
Yep, found her. And she remembers very clearly Gail calling a couple of times and each time getting more and more worried and more scared about what might be
going on or have
happening.
gone on. Right. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that sort of nails down that. Isn't it, it's just fate's a terrible thing. Had you and another reporter from The Age, let's say, been living in that flat and looked out the window and seen that, you would have reported it, you would have been good witnesses, fluent in English, you would have reported it to the police, and this whole case might have been different from the start. But it was Argentinian, Ukrainian nuns who had no idea about anything and were scared and were warned not to do anything except be careful.
No, that's right.
So
and
it could hardly have been worse witnesses in that sense.
In that sense.
Yeah.
But they could have been terrific witnesses had the whole scenario been different and had their English been different. But we have to remember too. No, it wasn't.
Hi, it's Gary Jubilant here. Do you want a real and raw look inside the world of crime? Well then check out my podcast, I Catch Killers, where I interview people from all sides of the law.
I draw my firearm and I went into fight mode. I wanted to find and confront this gunman.
I'm not getting verbal, am I?
I shouldn't have trusted you. See, I'm trying to open my mind up to defence bars.
I know, it's just begging to be said.
Yeah, fair call. We have amazing guests every week. Search for I Catch Killers wherever you get your podcasts.
Julie goes missing, but over the next couple of days, the police don't do much. There's no police presence.
What's your understanding of what the police did and didn't do, and how do you know it? How do you know?
Well, we know that the police eventually went to the apartment and did a very good job forensically.
At some point.
Yeah, at some point, but not straight away.
No.
But what we also know, and I've spoken, there are still a number of neighbours who remember no police presence at all. They remember hearing some vague story a couple of days later, probably a week later, because it was really, from what I can see, it was about a week before the story was reported in the papers.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
There was a time lag.
There was a time lag, and for a number of
Truth
days,
certainly weren't breaking it.
No, and for a number of days, I think the police, and understandably, just thought, oh look, she's on the tear. Whatever they thought, she'll come back.
Yeah.
I think there was a view that she might have even gone home to California, to the States. But the family at home...
There are a thing called passenger lists.
Yes.
How ridiculous is that? If she's not on a passenger list, she hasn't gone home to the States. I mean, I don't think she's going to hitchhike there.
Well, days go by. And we have to remember again, no missing persons unit, no concept really of missing people.
No.
So
it was a good time to get away with murder.
Uh-huh.
The post-war Australia was a very good, because there were cars, you know, you could drive from A to B fast, as fast as you can now.
Yes.
Really. And yet no cameras, no surveillance, no telephone troubles. You could get away with murder, and many people did.
Yeah. So, you know, there were probably other people who might have heard or seen things on the night, but they weren't spoken to. And when the police finally did start investigating, when her mum came out about a week later, it sort of coincides. That's when the reporting starts. That's when the mainstream media start getting interested in this young American teenager, soon to be 20-year-old, who's just gone.
Yeah.
You know, Julie's gone.
Julie's gone, yeah. It's a riveting mystery.
And her mother believes that right from the start they were a bit bamboozled by it. But the saddest thing, apart from Julie vanishing, is that John Power, who, as you say, was well known to the police, was under surveillance by police at the time.
Oh, good.
Was under surveillance by the armed robbery squad.
Oh, that's lucky, because, you know, they grabbed him straight away.
But they lost him for 3 days.
Did they?
Yeah. Including that day.
Where'd you find that out?
It was granted permission and got access to the part of the police file that went to the coroner.
This is magnificent stuff. This is a very good subject for your excellent new podcast, Julie's Gone, which we are, you know, riding on the coattails of right here. That is a very significant thing, that the police were watching him for whatever reason, to do with armed robberies probably, and they lose him for 3 days because he probably knew he was under surveillance, but he also knew how to evade it. What they call a good crook, meaning he's a very bad man, who was a very good crook. He knew how to dodge and duck and weave. It is very interesting. What would push him to evade police surveillance or do tricky things in the middle of the night? Well, getting rid of a body, you would think.
But it's not clear
It's
what
not
happened.
clear.
And even now, 50 years,
No.
50
And I
years
know
later.
We've been through this before, but it's worth going through the basics. That her mother, the missing girl's mother, Mrs. Garciacelay, comes across from California to Victoria.
She comes across within a week. She's there within certainly 10 days. She's there I think she's here by the 8th of July.
And she's fairly up and about. She was pretty active in trying to find things out. At some point later on, she got into Pentridge, did she not? And spoke to Power.
Yeah,
Is that
was
right?
that was a couple of years later.
Yeah.
So she stayed. I think she stayed in Melbourne initially for a couple of weeks, and then took her daughter Gail home because you
Right.
can imagine how upset and distraught Gail was. And then in 1977,
She'd feel terrible.
yeah, she did. Gail particularly got it in her mind that Julie was still alive. She rang the hotel that Julie had worked at before she took the job at the Southdown Press and asked to speak to her. And somebody on the phone, who answered the phone said, yeah, hang on, I'll go get her. So I put the phone down and it went away. And eventually, of course, the line went dead. But she was convinced.
Can't help thinking.
Of course,
and yet it's
wanting to believe.
Yeah.
That her sister had somehow.
Because her problem is she feels massive guilt because she wasn't there that night and she probably should have been.
Right,
You
yeah.
know, more or less.
Well, whether she should have been. I mean, I don't know whether Julie told her she was bringing, this is what we can't establish. But she goes to her mum and says, look, we really have to go home. Julie's still there.
I'm not saying she should have been, but she would undoubtedly
Think that.
feel, she would undoubtedly
Yes,
feel
I
that
see.
given what happened. Yeah.
So anyway, they come back again in 1977.
yeah.
But Gail is so, again, distraught and upset. She doesn't stay long, but in that particular visit, and that's the second and the final time they come to Australia, you can understand why, Ruth Garciacelay, Julie's mum, goes into Pentridge and speaks to John Power and basically says to him, look, John, you're the father of 3 daughters. I'm the mother of 3 daughters. Please tell me, where is my daughter? And he puts his hand up to one ear and goes under his throat, like in a slitting motion, and then points to the ceiling and says, go higher. And I remember this. Ruth says, go higher. John, what do you mean? You know, give me a clue. What are you saying? And he does it again. Go higher, go higher. So for the next however many, 45, 46 years, she lives with that, not knowing what he means. And we still don't know what he meant.
Have you got any guess?
No, when she told me, I did think, I wonder whether it relates in any way to the Beach Inquiry, because later that year in 1975, he did give evidence to the Beach Inquiry. I mean, the obvious inference is Julie's dead,
Yeah, of
slitting
course,
motion.
yeah.
Go higher. I
But
don't know.
maybe these are two separate messages. One is she's dead.
Yep.
The second is, full stop. And the second one is go high. Does that mean she's been taken up into the hills to get rid of her? Like King Lake or, I don't know. I mean, they're not necessarily all part of one sentence.
No. Or,
one mimed sentence.
or could you ask someone
Higher.
higher? I don't know. I don't know. I don't pretend to know, and it's a particularly cruel thing to have said to her. If he was trying to give her a message,
It was no good.
it's lost to her, and it's lost to us now. So many decades later. But it is
Unless he was, John Joseph Power, you can tell from his name. He was one of that old, so many crooks in those days, that sort of Irish-Australian pedigree. They've been brought up around the inner suburbs under the thumb of the Catholic Church, or if not the thumb, at least part of it. And we forget easily that in those days that people referred to God and heaven and hell routinely. It was part of the conversation.
Right.
It was part of their mental furniture. And maybe he meant she's in heaven.
maybe.
Because that's not something people would say now, but it was certainly something people used to say then.
Yeah. Okay.
Where's Grandpa? Oh, he's in heaven, and he's looking down on us or something.
Yeah.
That sort of died in a generation, but it hadn't died in the
Then.
70s, because we're talking about Power would have been born in the 30s or 40s. So his childhood was either Depression times or wartime. So it's a long time ago now. A different era and a different frame of reference, a different idiom. Maybe that's what he meant.
Maybe.
She's dead and in heaven.
But she never unravelled it, and it's hard. We can
guess all we like.
have a guess, but it was a particularly cruel is the word that comes to my
Terrible,
mind to
yeah.
say to a mother. But what a mum! Imagine doing that. Imagine going into Pentridge on your own to see a guy like John Power, who the police have said to her, I think in her first visit, had made it very clear that he was a guy they didn't want to tangle with. I think one of the detectives at the time said he's not the sort of person you want to meet in a dark lane. at night. And they'd also said to her that he had been stalking her daughter.
Yeah.
And when she told me that story, when we did the original interview,
stalking
was the word she used. She said, I don't know how they knew that. And I didn't know. But now we do know because he was under surveillance. So they had obviously
some idea
of what he'd been doing.
And he glimpsed, if he's been going into the truth with Tommy Collins to look at the files to do with the beach inquiry or whatever, blah, 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 he spotted her. And there she is, sun-kissed, sun-tanned, mini-skirted girl from California, and he's a reptile. Yeah. He's a deviant.
And yet Tommy
a very violent
Collins was the man who took Julie out the night before she went missing to see, I think he wanted to show her a club that he was interested in buying and then dropped her at home later that night. So
when you look at it, given the difference in ages and that, strikes me as sort of a false front. I mean, why show a teenage girl a club that you're interested in buying? Why ask her about soul food? What the hell would she know, really, about setting up a restaurant? She's a girl. She's a kid from just out of high school, for goodness sake. Clearly, they're sharks circling a lamb.
And I don't know how...
If sharks circle lambs.
Yes. And I don't know...
Probably wolves.
...how that particular wolf was introduced to Julie in the first instance. I don't know how Tommy Collins came to ask her out...
Well,
to see that club.
They were going into the truth, Southdown Press Library, and there she is. And who took them in there? John Grant. Not that makes it John Grant's fault, but...
But we don't know that either.
No.
And I could never establish how...
It's not his fault.
No,
it doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter. Yeah. But I just couldn't establish that initial link to Tommy. How did she meet Tommy in the first instance? I don't know. But that's what happened, and the three men ended up in that apartment, and all these things followed. And she's never been seen since, and nor has her body ever been recovered. It
is a truly shocking story and a tantalising mystery, which, of course... we've always linked up with Easey Street, which is something we can't say a lot about because of the fact that a man who was a young man in 1977 has been arrested in Rome and has been brought back to Australia and is currently in custody pending trial. So we can't say a lot about it. But, of course, the link that the police were examined at the time was, and we've been through this so many times, the link was that John Grant, who was the Truth crime reporter, the Julie Garciacelay, one of the three at the apartment, he also, by chance, was next door to the Easey Street house on the night that the two Sues were murdered in 1977. It would appear to be, and the police concluded this, would appear to be just a massive coincidence, which it happens.
It does happen. And we have to say here, John Grant has absolutely been cleared through DNA testing of the Easey Street terrible, brutal double homicide. Yeah. And no one has ever been charged for Julie's disappearance and indeed her murder, because in 2018 the Victorian coroner decided she had been murdered by person or persons unknown. Yeah. There is a somewhat positive thing that has eventuated. Julie's mum, Ruth Garciacelay, 21 years ago started a scholarship in her name at a university not far from her home in California because Julie was a really gifted pianist. Yeah. So this is a scholarship for piano players, basically. And the interesting thing was she told them that it was for her daughter, but they didn't know why. So I spoke to the lecturer who's, with Ruth, organising the scholarship every year, and until Ruth sort of asked her to speak to me for the podcast, she didn't really understand what had happened to Julie. So in a good way, Julie's name, still lives. And as far as her mother's concerned, her greatest fear has always been that we'd all just forgotten about it. The police in Victoria, police in Australia had just forgotten about her daughter and that we'd never really known about her daughter. But now, even as hard as it was to talk about this again, decades and decades later, this gives her some, I think, reassurance that her daughter is going to be remembered. How old is she now? 93. She's still with us? Yes, but in very, very poor health. Remarkable story of mother's love, probably hanging on to in the hope that something breaks through. Well, which reminds me of the Beaumonts. Exactly. Nancy Beaumont and her husband, albeit separated, Jim Beaumont, they lived
to huge ages. And it seemed to be that they wanted to hang on and hang on and hang on, hoping
Of course.
that, they'd find out
and
something.
I mean, in a sense, it's hard to think of anything much worse than not knowing where a loved one is.
The worst.
Not knowing what has happened.
The worst.
And fearing the worst. And, I mean, Ruth has said to me a number of times, all she's ever really wanted to do is bring Julie home and bury Julie before she goes. Now I think she, having heard the podcast, now I think she believes that might be too difficult because she's in poor health.
Yeah.
But she hopes that one day at least we'll find out where Julie is, has been put or buried, and that maybe something can be done to bless that ground, to mark that ground.
There's a faint chance.
Yeah.
I don't know how,
No.
but there's a faint chance. I don't see how anybody living could know unless, John Joseph Power told somebody who told somebody else, which is highly unlikely.
Yes. Yep.
Unless somebody sort of stumbles over something somewhere. But if it's up the bush in a mine shaft or something, well, that's probably not going to happen.
That's right. And in the meantime, late last year, there was a plaque laid at St John's Lutheran Chapel in Southgate here in Melbourne.
Yeah.
In fact, Andrew, just literally 2 minutes across from your office.
Yeah.
So if anyone does want to pay respects to Julie,
it's to go.
You could go there. And it's a beautiful little chapel. And a little Japanese maple was also planted. I just saw it this morning, actually. It's looking a little wintry at the moment, but there are little buds on it. So come spring, it'll look very pretty.
That's probably the right way to end our episode on the disappearance of Julie Garciacelay. It's based heavily on your new podcast, Julie's Gone. How many episodes?
7.
7. And episode 2, I think, is the one that introduces the nuns. But there are all the others, which I'm going to go home and listen to.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks for listening. Life and Crimes is a Sunday Herald Sun production for True Crime Australia. Our producer is Jonty Burton. For my columns, features and more, go to heraldsun.com.au/Andrew Rule, one word. For advertising inquiries, go to newspodcastssold@news.com.au. That is all one word, newspodcastssold. And if you want further information about this episode, links are in the description.